All right, we'll get started and call this special Board of Education meeting to order, please. Can we please do the roll?
Yes. Mr. Schultz?
Present.
Mr. Eustruck?
Here.
Mr. Bailey?
Present.
Mr. Keller?
Here.
Ms. Klug is excused. Mrs. Justum? Here. Mr. Sikich?
Present.
Mr. Lee?
Here.
President Emmons?
Here. All right, so we will get going on the budget here, public budget hearing for the 1920 school year. I thank Ms. Windler for all of her hard work. As everybody knows, the budget process is not a short one or a quick one or an uncomplicated, simple one. That these conversations have been going on since last year at this time to get to the point of where we are today. So we've had multiple workshops, action items, multiple conversations. The committee has worked diligently along with Caitlin to make sure that we get to a point today that we all feel that we've gotten adequate information, had an opportunity to ask lots of questions, and get to a point where we feel comfortable moving forward into the next steps. So that being said, thank you for all the work to get to this point, and let you begin with the presentation.
All right, well, I just want to thank the board for all of your help along the way in this first budget cycle of mine at our school district. So we will start with our mission statement to just remind us why and how we developed everything. This was at our forefront. So our district develops inquiry-driven, independent learners through instruction that is personalized and engaging with a focus on college and career readiness and 21st century skill development. And again, just want to thank our board members for your help along the way. All the discussions, all the questions have led us to a budget that we can be proud of at this point. And as they say, teamwork makes the dream work, so we couldn't do it without our administrative staff. So special thanks to Dr. Marty Lexman, our superintendent, Director of Leadership and Learning, Deidre Raymer, Director of Human Resources, Jeff Thompson, Director of Recreation, Shelley Strasser, and our Director of Communication and Community Relations, Beth Kaler. So we have a few timelines, a few things in our timeline that are coming up that make this budget still in its preliminary stage. So until these few dates pass us, we won't have our final numbers. So those few items are the September 20th third Friday pupil count, the October 1st tax apportionment valuation certification, October 15th final state aid calculation from DPI, and then at that point we'll have really know our final values in our budget for 1920, and then the board will approve the final 1920 budget and tax levy on October 28th. And then the following week is when our tax levy certifications are due to our 4 municipalities. So one thing I love doing is talking school finance and big picture, thinking big picture, how the formulas work to our board and the public and everything. So although it can be super complex, it really breaks down into a few formulas. So the first formula is very dependent on our third Friday count, and that's why that number is so important. So the mile-high picture of how we calculate our revenue limit authority is we take our resident membership times our per pupil dollar amount from the state, add in exemptions, and that gives us our total revenue limit authority. That revenue limit authority is the money that we bring in via property taxes and state aid. So if we plug our numbers in there, you can see these are estimates that we've used to build our budget. So $81.98 resident membership, a $10,240 per pupil amount, and that dollar amount was increased by $175 in the state's biennial budget. We add in our exemptions, including declining enrollment exemption, energy efficiency, private school vouchers, and transfer of service, and that gets us our total revenue limit authority of $89,242,226. So that is the amount of money, the full amount of money that we can spend on essentially operational, so Fund 38 debt and operational expenses in our budget. So step 2 of that is, how do we find what our tax levy is going to be? So we take that full revenue limit authority, and then we subtract our aid. So the state tells us our aid, and then aid and the tax levy work like a balancing scale. So when one goes up, the other goes down. When the other goes down, the other one goes up. So we take our total revenue limit authority, we just calculated in the last slide. We subtract the aid that the state tells us. So this number is, we don't do anything with this one. The state tells us these aid dollar amounts, and that gives us our total tax levy. And that tax levy is for, again, our Fund 10, Fund 38 expenses. So this computation gives us $38,339,783 for our tax levy. And then we figure out our total school-based tax levy. So when we plug in the numbers, you can see we take that $38 million that we saw on the previous slide. We first subtract out our Fund 38 payments. That tells us how much is left in Fund 10. That's why when we have those years when we have a lot of Fund 38 payments, our Fund 10 expenses, our Fund 10 budget is lower because it's, here's your revenue limit. If you use this much for Fund 38, then you only have this much left for Fund 10. If you have less in Fund 38, you have more in Fund 10 to spend. We had in Fund 39 payments, which we have none. We had in Fund 80, and for the last few years, the $3 million hasn't changed, so that's the same it's been for the last few years, and then other chargebacks that we have. So we get our total school-based tax levy of $41,354,783. And again, this is projected. This could change and likely will change with those few factors in our timeline that are coming up in the next few weeks that we talked about. So $41.3 million is our projected total school-based tax levy. So then the question is, how do we find our mill rate? So we take that tax levy dollar amount, we divide it by our equalized property value and multiply it by 1,000 to find our mill rate. So 41.3 million divided by our equalized property value times 1,000 is a projected mill rate of $9.13. This graph shows a history of our revenue limit. So what's interesting is you can see it's been climbing for the last many years. And in just from 1819 to 1920, it actually has gone down. So when we went in spring and talked through, we were seeing this 6.5 approximate $1 million deficit. That was the gap between our revenues and expenses that we're going to have to close for our 1920 budget. This is part of the reason. So our revenue limit as a whole, the amount of money we were bringing in as a whole, decreased from 1819. This graph I love because it really tells a story. So we talked about that balancing scale of tax levy versus equalization aid. So when your tax levy goes up, your equalization aid goes down. When your tax levy goes down, your equalization aid goes up. You can see in our past, so take a look from 9-10 school year through essentially 13-14, our tax levy was higher, our aid was lower. And that has since shifted. So it's really gone the other direction. And now our equalization aid is higher. So therefore, our tax levy is lower. Equalization aid is based off of essentially how property rich or property poor you are compared to the state average. So when you get more aid is when you're property poorer compared to the state average. You get less aid when you're property richer than the state average. So per our data, we've become more property poor compared to the state average. And that's why our numbers have fluxed like that. The mill rate history we can see has been slightly decreasing for the last few years, with the exception of 17-18 when we had the spike of 1099. So that's our budget as a whole. Now we'll go into the funds specifically. So our budget is divided into various funds, with Fund 10 being our general fund where most of our activities, all of our general current year operational activities are recorded. In Fund 10 and Fund 27, Fund 21 and 27, those are our special project funds. So Fund 21 is our special revenue trust fund, which is where gifts and donations from private parties are. Currently, and in past practice, we have a lot of activity in Fund 60 that should really be in Fund 21. That's what our project in our business office and working with the schools this year is cleaning up those Fund 60 accounts. So we'll have a lot more activity in Fund 21 this year and going forward. And then Fund 27 is our special education fund. So we'll go through some of those dollars that are coming from Fund 10 and Fund 27 as a whole. And Fund 27 functions, I want to say it functions in a deficit, but it doesn't support itself. So what we have to do each year is make a transfer from Fund 10 to Fund 27 to make Fund 27 net zero, essentially. So balances revenues and expenses. So in this graph, you can see our Fund 10 and Fund 27 revenues combined. So you can see our property taxes and then the general state aid make up over 80% of our revenues from Fund 10 and Fund 27. If we had just included Fund 10 in this graph, that general state aid portion would have been much less. And then the other aids that or other revenues that we have in Fund 10 and Fund 27 are categorical aids, open enrollment, grants. AGR is a grant, so it really should have been included in the grant. I'm not sure why it's pulled out separately, but that's how it's historically been done, so I kept it going. And then other revenue. So when we look at those dollars, we can see essentially this is what that graph came from, but local sources, inter-district payments, state sources, and federal sources are broken out on this page, and then all other as well. So the total projected revenues for Fund 10 and Fund 27 are $109,687,113. So that's the revenue side. We start with our revenue, and then we see how much money we have to spend in a year, and we work through our expenses. So just going through some of the focus and highlights in our 1920 budget. And again, this is a preliminary budget, so a big piece of our revenue is dictated by that resident membership, and we have that third Friday count this Friday. So again, these numbers will likely fluctuate, and then at that point we'll have another board workshop and talk through potentially what hopefully we've projected conservative enough that when we actually get our per pupil count, our resident membership count, that would hopefully provide us with additional funds, although that's still yet to be determined as we have our third Friday count. So the focus and highlights in this budget are 2.44% CPI increase with a 1% supplemental increase. That's right now the teachers and the EAs are still in the negotiation process, so they're included as if they would projected to have that 2.44% and the 1% supplemental, but at this point they're still in negotiations. School building budgets within this 1920 budget are restored back to 100% allocation, and if you remember, as we worked through the spring when we were originally looking at our deficit and just to manage our costs and bring our revenues to match our expenses, or I should say our expenses to match our revenues, we reduced the school budgets by 25%. So that was about a $475,000 cost we just added back into the budget so that those budgets are restored. This does include a 5% projected health insurance increase. So this is, originally when we budgeted, we were looking at about a 15%, and that was to be conservative because we had seen what happened in past years when we didn't do that. So we are working through those negotiations now as well, but it's looking to be about a 5% projected health insurance increase, which is really awesome. And I think we're starting to see some of our wellness center pay off, and that does have a cost for us, but it saves us in the long run when we look at our health insurance cost increases. This budget also does include an employee health insurance premium contribution increase from 10 to 12%. It also includes dedicated funds for professional development opportunities, assigned funds for development of a facilities master plan. Another item is a collaboration with employee groups to prepare sustainable compensation models. So that's something the board has really directed us to do this year. We're looking forward to starting that work with various employee groups and moving our compensation model forward. Computer refresh per technology upgrade schedule. So per that schedule, this year was essentially all non-teaching staff, and then next year teaching staff gets their computer refresh. So that's exciting. Everybody's working on their new computers. Focus on equity in funding schools with varying needs and a conservative approach to student enrollment. So we'll go through what that looks like in terms of Fund 10 and Fund 27 expenses. You can see salaries and benefits make up about 66% of our Fund 10 and Fund 27 budget. Then the next biggest portion is our purchase services. We also have supplies, capital equipment, debt retirement, insurance, transfers, and other. And there's a note on the bottom of this slide. This data excludes the $24 million transfer from Fund 10 to Fund 38 for one-time debt principal payments. So what that is a few years ago we took out a $26 million bond. That bond had 3 years of principal payments, 2 years of $1 million each, and then 1 year of $24 million. So 1920 is the year of the $24 million payment, that principal payment that we're paying back. That money is currently sitting in our fund balance in Fund 10. It's in an investment account earning interest, and 1920 is the year that we have to make the payment. So right now it's in Fund 10. We have to just do the transfer to Fund 38, and then we'll make that payment. So it's not affecting our budget. We've done enough in the last few years so that we don't have to levy for that or anything. It's not affecting our budget really in any sort of way. It's been sitting in our fund balance earning interest. So because that would totally skew this graph, I didn't want to include it just so you could see without that what kind of our salaries and benefits and purchase services, those big items look like in a pie graph. The 24 million is included in the next slide, so you can see in Fund 10 that other objects is at 35,444,796, and that's with the 24 million. So normally that number is about 11 million, and that's why that's so inflated. It's just that one-time principal payment that we have. And that's also why you'll see the expenses so much higher this year than revenues, is just that 24 million. So kind of what I've been doing is just taking it out in my head when I'm looking at a balanced budget, because it really, we know our budget's essentially going to be, our expenses are going to be 24 million more than our expenses, but we've already accounted for that. Next is our debt funds. We have Fund 38 and Fund 39. Essentially, Fund 38 is within the revenue limit, and Fund 38 is outside of the revenue limit. We do have Fund 38 funds, so we have a tax levy. We budget our revenues based on the 2020 calendar year. It's always on the calendar year, and our expenses are on the fiscal year. So our levy is for 2020 expenses of $4,441,005.80, and then our expenses, our principal and interest payments, are $28,942,730.80. And again, that includes that $24 million payment. So historically, our debt payments are not this high. And Fund 39, we have no revenues or expenses.
Caitlin,
Yeah, go ahead.
how much, after we pay off our $24 million debt, less interest are we going to be paying annually?
It will be very similar to this year minus the 24 million. So about 4 million, but I can get you the actual number.
So I guess specifically for that bond, I wanted to know how much interest we were paying each year, because obviously it's not just the 24 million
Right.
less, it's also the interest from
Yeah.
that 24 million that we're.
So we've paid interest of $960,000 one year and $1 million the next year.
So how much is it for this year?
So in 1920 is $1 million of interest.
So 1 million less. So is that effectively 25 million less than it will be for the following?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, because it's $24 million interest payment and $1 million interest, 24 million principal and $1 million in interest.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So this graph is very telling, and I feel like kind of walks us through what we went through in the spring. So we saw in a previous graph that our revenue limit as a whole went down a little bit from 1819. We also see in 1920 these debt payments of $4.4 million that we hadn't levied for in the past. And the reason we hadn't levied for them, they were relatively the same expenses, but we had previously transferred money from Fund 10 to Fund 38, essentially prepaying Fund 38 debt. We didn't actually make those debt payments, but we had the money transferred from Fund 10 to Fund 38, so we didn't have to levy. This year we did levy, and I just want to note, think back to our 18-19, when we talked through that surplus, we had the building sale, and then we also had a budget surplus. We did transfer $4 million from Fund 10 to Fund 38, so know that that is sitting in Fund 38 fund balance essentially right now, but we still have built our budget on levying that $4.4 million. So what that means is essentially we could not levy $4 million and use our fund balance, which would free up dollars for Fund 10, or we can use that for future purchases. So know that 1819 surplus hasn't changed. And this graph that shows this $4.4 million in expenses, those expenses, we've had a similar amount of expenses in Fund 38 debt payments. In the past, we've just prepaid with the previous year's budget. But this is why, go ahead, Noah.
Once you transfer to Fund 38, can you transfer it back?
I don't know that answer. I'll have to look into it.
So
Right.
essentially what you're saying is if we could use it for something else, meaning that we just don't levy for Fund 38 and then put
Yes.
it into Fund 10 so we can use it for something else that
Yep.
we need to use it for.
Yep, so like if our revenue limit is this high and this much is for Fund 38 debt, then we only have this much for Fund 10. If we levy less in Fund 38, we use that fund balance that's sitting in there, then we have that, whatever that less was, we have that additionally in Fund $10 to spend. So I'll move on to Fund 46 and Fund 49. So these are our capital improvement funds. Fund 46 is our long-term capital improvement trust fund. So this is the one where we have to have the 5-year, you keep it in there for 5 years and then you can use it. This is where we have our turf field replacement plan dollars sitting. So we have, per our schedule, have to put $325,000 into Fund 46 each year to maintain our schedule, to replace our fields in X amount of years per that schedule. And then Fund 49 was where we had the building fund. So that's where the CIP dollars can roll over from year to year. However, you do have to levy, you have to borrow for those dollars. So if we did put dollars into Fund 49, we will have interest payments on those. So it's not just we want to put 1.2 million of our total revenue limit into Fund 49 without essentially repercussions. We would have to pay additional dollars via interest on those Fund 49, on that Fund 49 levy. So one thing I wanted to point out was in 1920's budget, we have the 1.2 million for CIP budgeted. However, that's in Fund 10. So we don't currently have a levy or additional borrowing for Fund 49 dollars. We have that 1.2 million of CIP in Fund 10. If we decided we wanted to borrow and pay the additional interest just to have the benefit of Fund 49 dollars rolling over, we could look into that too. But this budget right now has the 1.2 million of CIP in Fund 10, not Fund 49. And our building sale from 1819 entirely went into Fund 49. So that money is going to be sitting in there until we decide to use it, whether that's for future admin building or whatever we decide. Fund 50 is our food service fund. So federal regulations require that we separate accounting for food service, and we must not work on a deficit. So if we do function on deficit, we have to transfer, just like we do for Fund 27, from Fund 10 to Fund 50. We work on a profit. So Sodexo has done a really great job with running our food service program, and we are bringing in more revenues than we are having expenses. However, we're actually at the point now where DPI said, you have too much sitting in your fund balance. You have to have a plan to spend that down. So what we've done is we have a few projects slated for this year, and I'm going to skip ahead one slide. So our expenditures are more than revenues, and generally we would budget for food service equal revenues and expenses, so we have a balanced budget in Fund 50. However, we purposely have more expenses than revenues in our Fund 50 budget this year because we have those projects that we're excited to roll out in 1920. So that includes the expansion of cooler and freezers at Hale, replacement of coolers and freezers at FLW and Central. And then also in Fund 50, we have the CEP program, so Community Eligibility Program, which allows our schools that are eligible for that program to have free breakfast and free lunch for all students, regardless of a free and reduced lunch status per the individual. So all students at these 10 schools receive free breakfast and free lunch. That is Franklin, Horace Mann, Jefferson, Longfellow, Madison, Pershing, Wilson, Dotke, West Milwaukee Intermediate School, and Central High School. And one thing that we're really working on kind of as a whole, essentially administrative team, is it's still important for us to receive those free and reduced lunch forms back, even when the schools qualify for CEP, because we have funds through title and grants that we get when we have that free and reduced lunch percentage, which those grants don't always take into account the CEP number. So And oftentimes when the schools don't have to pay, when the parents don't have to pay for the individual because they're ready on CEP, they think, well, I don't need to turn the form in. So we really have to do a better job of communicating, which we're working through as an administrative team, on why it's still important for those families to turn those forms in. Fund 80 is our community service fund. So this is everything related to adult education, community rec programs, and or care services. And we are looking at, again, we have a lot of funky things in the 1920 budget. So one of them is our expenses are much higher than our revenues. And again, that's not a normal thing. Normally we have our revenues equal our expenses, but this year we have the majority of our new Fund 10 Recreation Center construction expenses happening in 1920. So we have budgeted for that $7.4 million. So our expenses are about $7.4 million higher than our revenues due to that construction. So our new rec center is set to be complete summer of 2020, and we are so excited about it. It's kind of fun to drive by and see the walls going up and the beams going up. So, and this Fund 80, this rec center, has been 100% funded by the Fund 80 fund balance. So that was just due to being fiscally responsible, and it is not increasing our Fund 80 tax levy, which is awesome. So you can see our Fund 80 beginning balance, $7.9 million. With our estimated revenues and expenses, our fund balance at the end of 1920 is expected to be about $566,000, which is planned. We know that it's going to go down, and that was planned for the building. So our projected tax levy for 1920, this kind of comes full circle to what we talked about in the beginning. So we have our Fund 10 levy and our Fund 38 levy. Then we also have to add into there our Fund 10 chargebacks and our Fund 80 levy, which gets us our total proposed projected property tax levy. And again, these numbers are likely to change between now and October 28th due to those few items that we saw in our timeline that are coming up in the next few weeks. So our total proposed property tax levy for 1920 is $41,354,783. And then the breakdown of that is between our general fund, debt service, and community service. You can see that general fund is obviously the biggest portion of that at 82%, debt service at 11%, and community service at 7%. So if you take this graph and if you made that debt service piece smaller, so the Fund 38 debt payment smaller like we've had in previous years, you can see how it would open up more funds for our Fund 10, our general fund. And then we'll look at two last graphs, so our tax levy history and our mill rate history. So this shows our tax levy history from 1819 to 1920. This projected 1920 budget is about a 1% decrease. And our mill rate comparison from the last 10 years is so 1819's mill rate was $9.54. 1920's projected mill rate is $9.13, which represents about a 4.29% decrease. So it's important to know that it has been going down, and again in 17-18 was when we saw that spike of $10.99. Any questions?
Do we have any questions from our guests in the audience on the budget hearing? Okay, go ahead, we ask. Anything you'd like to summarize, or any final
Sure.
thoughts?
Yep, so I just wanted to clarify a bit on the 1819 versus the 1920 budget. So when we talked through on August 26th, our 1819 budget surplus, that has not changed. So we have the building sale going to Fund 49, we have the transfer of $4 million from Fund 10 into Fund 38, and then that remaining budget is increasing our fund balance to a projected about $19 million. So we're still working through our final state reporting and our final wrapping up our audit. So that's not finalized yet, but it's looking to be about $19 million. And we just graphed out our fund balance history, and it's a pretty picture now. So it's from where it was
Yeah.
to where it is now is, it's pretty.
Yeah, and the goal, and we've said this many times publicly, is to get to about $20 million in fund balance, so we're getting very close to that. And it's also good news because the dollars that we have been, designating and even having a very good year last year, putting more into fund balance, eventually those dollars don't need to go there anymore. So that opens up more dollars in Fund 10 again.
So our 1920 budget, as presented, is a preliminary budget. We have those few factors that will change. So I think we'll do another budget workshop before we have our final approved tax levy and final 1920 budget on October 28th.
Any other questions for Caitlin?
I just really like this. Makes it nice and easy.
Like graphs and.
Yes.
It is presented
Yeah.
very nicely. You did a really good job with
Caitlin,
that.
thank you for all your hard work and for the, I'm gonna say, evidence that you show us what's actually going on. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
My goal personally is to inform and to be transparent. So that's personally my goal. I hope I've accomplished that.
You have.
Thank you.
That's a great goal for this district, so thank you.
Any other comments for Caitlin? Jeff?
Oh, not for Caitlin.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure before anything else that we've answered, we've given everybody time and opportunity as the questions come up and everything. But it seems like there aren't any more, so did you want to?
I just wanted to commend you, Marty. Your leadership got us through some of the worst times this district ever went through. And I personally thank you.
Yep, you're welcome, everybody. It's been a journey, but we're in a good place.
Yep, much better.
All right, if there aren't any other comments, we'd look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Dan? Opposed? All right, thank you,
Yep.
Caitlin.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.